just textbook it. Water temperature's dropped now. From yesterday, it's dropped about 5 degrees. Well, you know, basically the deal is we have it's springtime. It had been warm. The water temperature got up and a lot of these fish had moved out to spawn. And now we got one of them, what you hate in the spring, one of those hideous cold fronts. You can tell I'm fishing in gloves. And the deal is, this is really a textbook deal for the southern United States. Big spawning flat. There's beds scattered around out here everywhere. I can see them. And you know, there's just been, you know, we've had about 3 days of this cold weather, and finally these fish have left the bed. And, you know, typically in the South, when these fish do that, they don't run completely back to where they wintered at when the water temperature drops. They know it's going to warm back up, and typically they'll just suck to whatever the heaviest cover. You know, it can be cattails, lily pads, you know, it doesn't, you know, here, of course, we got perfect. These are some blown in hyacinth mats mixed with some other vegetation, and it's really textbook. So when you have that condition, you know, basically what you want to do is just go to a spawning flat, you know, a place where you know they're spawning, or maybe they have been, or they will, and start looking for the heaviest cover closest by. Another thing I've noticed today, because I fished a little already, is that anywhere I can find just a slight depression with a mat. Now I might catch one out of any of these mats, but the mat that's just a little deeper seems to hold multiple fish. You know, it'll surprise me right here that, you know, that I don't get several bites, you know, out of this, because this is pretty big. And but like I said, this is just really a textbook deep South, you know, Louisiana, Texas, Florida, you know, really anywhere in the South, South Carolina, you know, lakes that you know, have a lot of vegetation, and those fish will just, and you know, and the deal is you need really just enough water under that mat most of the time for them to get under there. So if you got a foot of water under there, that's enough. And of course, like I said, some of these mats got a couple feet of water on them, and those seem to be the, you know, definitely the ones that have multiple bites. You know, Strike King makes a lot of great plastics, you know, flipping plastics, but probably my number one choice, you know, especially during cold conditions like we have now, is a Strike King rodent. You know, it has such a great profile. It's just a great all-around flipping bait. But one thing that I've noticed, you know, baits with a lot of appendages that stick out don't go through that mat as well. And that rodent is a fairly, you know, it's just a perfect profile, and it's a fairly streamlined bait. Doesn't really, all the appendages lay down on it. Nothing sticks out. And you know, that can be really important, because like the situation I'm in right now, you know, that wind is blowing, and what'll happen a lot of times when that wind blows on that mat, it'll pack it up tight, makes it harder to get through. I can't even talk. They're trying to mess me up, jacking around. I always try to use the lightest weight that I can fish efficiently with, you know, especially when the weather's cold. Now, that not so much in the summertime or when you're punching mats and the water's hot, because you want that bait, you want a reaction bite, and you want it just to blow through there. I just feel like when the weather's cooler and the water temperature's colder, if I can get a 3/4 through there, don't throw the ounce, you know, stick with the 3/4. It just slows down that bait, you know, under that mat. And that's mat fishing.
Yeah, I know.
And you know, that's the other cool thing about it is I've not moved the boat, and I've had maybe 5 bites, caught 2 good ones, jerked a little one out of the mat. I mean, and that's the deal. You think about, you look how big the area is around, a lot of fish, you know, migrate into that, migrate into one mat. So that's another thing. And anytime you get bit in one, always come back and check it at different times. Because a lot of times those fish are under there, but they're not active. Just because they're under there, it's not a guarantee that they're gonna bite. So there'll be a timing deal with mat fishing, just like it is, of course it's getting later in the day. Even though it's cold, it's still a timing deal in the spring. Always seems like the afternoons are better. Now, I always have a good selection because I do believe that color flipping mats will get you some extra bites. So I know that the color I'm using is close to the crawfish color. I've caught enough of them and seen the crawfish in their throat. And if any time I know exactly what they're eating, I want my bait to look exactly the same. Now, do I think I could get some bites on a black and blue under there? Well, yeah. But I just feel like I'll get more bites by being exactly the same, because you look, this water's clear. Now that fish is under that mat, but we have clear water conditions. Did I say I love mat fishing? It's like we found a school. In a minute, I'm not gonna throw in the exact same place again. Yeah, a lot of times, you gotta shake it, to get it to go through. And look right there. That's what I told you. You can just barely see the tentacles sticking out. But that's what these fish are eating. And that's the reason that, that rodent is tailor-made for that. Just another little fat chunk. I don't wanna, the deal is, as long as I can shake it and get it through, I got enough weight. What I don't wanna run into is I've had to skip 10 foot of mat to get it to go through. So that's what I mean by that you can get it through there. I don't want to be looking necessarily for cracks to get it to go through. I want to be able to go through the juice, the main part of the mat. But again, if I can get, like today, if I can get a 3/4 through it, when the weather's cold. Now again, when the weather's warm and the water temperature's hot, because these fish will be, there'll be mats around the country, matted grass and stuff. Then I want that super fast rate of fall when that water's hot. Their metabolism's up, and I want them to reaction. They cannot stand it. Sometimes when they're in a lethargic mood, when it's cold and all, if you drop that bait in there on them too fast, they'll swim off. But if I slip it in there on him when he's not in a, then it's just, it's easy, it's right there, it's not disturbing me, I just, eat it. Another thing that I, like is how you fish it. They'll kind of tell you. So if you'll notice what I'm doing, I'm lifting and holding it for a second before I drop it back down. They seem like they like that. But typically that situation, I don't care where you are, you get bit out of a mat, whether it's 1 bite or 10 bites, you can typically come back to that same mat and get bit again. And mats vary in size. They can be big as the front of the boat, or it can be a couple acres, I like the smaller ones the best just because you can fish them so efficiently. In the situation we got here, I can fish from the outside to the inside. And there'll be days, when the weather changes, warms up a little bit, they'll be relating to the outside. I've seen them go from, I'll catch them flipping to spinner bait and outside edge. They don't leave it. They just, weather gets a little better and they start to pull out. And a lot of times when you get really, really big wind and it really makes a move, a lot of times they don't seem like they like to be under there. I think it, the deal is it messes up their senses when all that stuff's moving ahead of them, And a fish has heightened senses, to survive in the world it does, so. I've had that happen in Florida a couple times. But it seems like just soon as it, the weather calmed just a little bit, they would ease back, and I think they just pull out and set till it, and then ease back under there. You know, another thing that happens sometimes when you're doing this, if you watch when I'm shaking that bait to get it to go through, I want that rod high. And the reason for that, I want plenty slack, because what'll happen a lot of times is just as soon as it breaks through, they'll get it. And what you don't want to be is right there, because what'll happen is he'll pull you and there's no place for you to go. So if I'm up high like that, he bites me, then I can just drop into position. When the line gets tight, I'm ready, you know, because they will a lot of times. And I think, especially like when it's a little slicker conditions, you know, they get attracted to that. There's something moving on top of that mat, and all of a sudden, you know, they're attracted to that. And as soon as it comes through, you know, they're on it. You know, they don't know if it's a crawfish, bait fish, whatever's moving around. I mean, shelling them. I mean, wow.
Right. You ready?
When it loads up again, I'm like,
Really?
surely it's hung.
Right.
Right. I'm like, there's no way they were, like that last one, totally, I was like, nah, that ain't a bite. It's stuck in that mat. And about that time I see the mat go.